Let's try this again, shall we? A brief introduction, and then we will get to the meat of the matter. Yesterday, a video was posted, a conversation and an interview by Kerry Cassidy of Johnston, published on the Project Camelot YouTube channel. The subject, the untimely passing of Max Spiers. Later that night, I recorded a video commenting and analyzing the contents of their interview. Why? Quite frankly, I believe that it illustrates several key problems in the alternative media, new age, conspiracy theory, milieu, and world. I then made the decision to pull that video. Quite frankly, the state of mind that I was in the demeanor and tone I took in the video, led it to be probably quite humorous, but also by turns quite dark, and quite frankly, at the end of the day, I concluded that it was, for various reasons, unacceptable to me and was delisted. For those people who are curious about the contents of that video, I am willing to share the link with individuals who follow my channel and who I believe could be trusted to have discretion with the link. Not playing favorites, it is what it is. I'll be completely honest. I made statements that, due to their inflammatory nature and impassioned delivery, may have warranted one or more individuals to complain about the video. I'm heavily emotionally invested in this channel. I get a lot out of it and my participation in it, and I don't want it flagged or pulled down. So I thought it wise, for various reasons, to pull it and redo it. I made an explanation video about that. Now that we are making the video again, the explanation video serves no real purpose, and that has been made private. Again, I might be willing to just render it delisted and allow people to get access to that video, again, on a discretionary basis. I reserve that right. That's life. The untimely passing of Max Spiers, and the reason that I think that this video, this interview by Kerry Cassidy of Johnston, is worthy of review and analysis, is due to several reasons. I made notes on the video and made notes and timestamps so that you can refer back to the primary source, that interview, check my analysis, watch at your leisure those points, and decide whether or not you agree, disagree, or are indifferent as to my conclusions. I am sometimes accused of taking too long to get to the point, so I will make my thesis statements here. The fact of the matter is that Project Camelot and Miles Johnston Spaces Project are two of the biggest alt media resources and alt news resources available on YouTube. I believe that is a shame, because I do not believe that either of these individuals are doing a very good job of stewardship over their channel, or of the vetting and choice of their interview subjects. Quite frankly, the word discernment is a buzzword in our modern world, but I believe that both of these channels can be characterized as having an express lack of discernment, and quite frankly, I believe both these channels muddy the waters of alternative information gathering and research. We do live in a world where there are cover-ups and there are conspiracies. We do live in a world where government collusion and criminality does occur. We do live in a world where some information and technology may or may not be suppressed. It does not help the community to have the two of the largest channels putting on information that I quite frankly believe is put on with an agenda, and quite frankly is just, it's bananas, folks. The information of the people that they choose to put on and they choose to put forward to the community as being legitimate whistleblowers, contactees, experiencers, and insiders is laughable, in my opinion. This video consists of my opinion and my opinion only. My thesis points also include the fact that I believe that because both of these individuals are operating their channels as their primary or sole source of income affects the quality of the information. And the exact same problems that media have, that money in the mainstream media, stop it, Lenny, also occurs in these channels for the very same reasons. There's a desire to create controversy. There's a desire to have juicy and new information all the time. Quite frankly, that's not the way that news works. It certainly doesn't work in this more limited scope of the news, where you're not going to have organically new whistleblowers, new MyLab abductees, new alien contactees every other week. But yet, that is what a media-hungry audience desires, and so that is what ends up being supplied by these channels. I believe that the only reason that Project Camelot is the size that it is not because of the quality of their information. In fact, I was joking with a friend today that there seems to be an inverse law that the more wackadoo, sensational, and crazy the information is, the more askew it is from reality, increases the likelihood of its success and popularity. Come to YouTube with an attempt at a rational analysis of information and available data. Good luck, Richard Dolan. Tell people fantastical stories about traveling to Mars, going through time, and to see Jesus Christ die on the cross. Congratulations, Corey Good. You're going to be voted the grand champion of them all. The passing of Max Spiers is also a legitimate concern, in my opinion, because of its essentially tragic nature. And I believe it illustrates, like I said, several key deficiencies in the gathering and use of information, as well as what ends up happening to these testifiers at the end of the day. Specifically, we've spoken about Kerry, Cassidy, and my problems with Project Camelot. Turning now to Miles Johnston, I will say the following. I believe that Miles Johnston has made a career of presenting the testimony of individuals who, number one, maybe have no legitimate information to share with the world, but number two, clearly seem, as a class of individuals, psychologically unprepared for the ramifications and the effects of becoming a whistleblower, an Illuminati insider, testifier. And we can see the resultant tragedies. We will analyze the information and the data and the testimony of these two individuals during their interview so that I can share with you, point by point, my concerns at each twist of the road. And I will leave you to make your own conclusions at the end of the day as to whether or not my analysis and opinions have value for you or whether or not they don't. I will say this before we begin moving forward. You know, folks, if your consumption of the interviews and media provided by Project Camelot and the Basis Project is mere entertainment, and I believe for a significant portion of the viewing audience, that is the case. It's just like live action X-Files. It's just like, what will they say next? It's just like, I can't believe people believe this on the internet. If that's the case, then the analysis doesn't matter. There are some people who seem to get very impassioned and quote unquote fall in love with these media players. And I just want to say that if you, on the other hand, are consuming this media, looking at these interviews, looking at this information because it is part and parcel of your own individual research to get to the truth, understand this. Your search for the truth should have nothing to do with loyalty to a media character. Right? Kerry Cassidy doesn't need to be your champion. Okay? And I dare say, as I will get to in my analysis, she's done nothing to deserve those accolades and praise. I will say the same for Miles Johnston. People just get excited about this subject. They get excited about feeling like they're part of a community. And before you know it, they're defending these people who need no defense. If these media outlets are outlets where information comes out, God bless. And let me say definitively, the notion that there can be any justification for loyalty based on the fact that Miles Johnston or Kerry Cassidy are placing themselves in danger, right, to spread the good word is simply not true. Okay? Nobody cares. YouTube is not trying to shut them down. No one cares because the information they're presenting is no harm to the powers that be. In fact, by muddying the waters and filling your head full of nonsensical clone stories and white dragon families and mass cabal arrests and super secret soldier programs and targeted individuals, the powers that be are insulated because their actual crimes and conspiracies remain covered up. The individuals that would be the type to pursue the truth are opiated. They are drugged out and put back to sleep by this simple masturbatory cycle of endlessly being told new data and information that just, quite frankly, folks, has no veracity, has no factual backup, and has no reason to justify your belief. As the famous statement from X-Files goes, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, many of you are doing a disservice to the truth because instead of looking out for what you should believe, you're merely guided, like Fax Mulder, by the fact that you want to believe. A key point at the beginning, we will now begin the analysis of the interview. I will say this, at the very opening moments before Miles Johnston joins the conversation, it is very important that you pay attention. There's a key thing that occurs that if you blink, you might miss. When Miles Johnston first enters the conversation, it is very, very clear that he does not yet know that they are broadcasting live over Google Chats. And not knowing that he's going out live, he says to Kerry Cassidy the following. Monica, who was the individual who had the apartment, owned the apartment that Max Spiers passed away in, says, according to Miles Johnston, and Miles Johnston shares with Kerry Cassidy, leave it alone, it was just an accident. Miles Johnston can clearly be heard to say, in a tone of voice that conveys his apparent belief in that Max Spiers died accidentally. As we go through the information, I think you will clearly see that what actually happened to poor Max Spiers is the following. He had an accidental overdose. He probably didn't suicide. He probably simply, like many people do, had an accidental drug overdose while visiting and staying with people in Poland in preparation for his participation in a conference there. There has been some speculation that he was in Turkey. There's no evidence to support that. The only information that suggests that he was in Turkey is his own testimony in an earlier radio interview during the week, testimony that was clearly occurred while he was stating to the interviewer his desire to keep his actual location a secret. I apologize, I don't have that reference or link for you to provide. Take my fucking word for it. Okay. Hopefully we'll get to the end of this. I feel a fair amount of passion about this subject, but I'm doing my best to remain level and calm, though it might affect the hilarity of my performance and presentation. Hopefully it will prevent me from calling either Kerry Cassidy, Miles Johnston, or you, the audience, a bunch of filthy, nasty words. Here we go. So as I said, at the beginning and the outset, it is very clear, and Miles Johnston at a later point in the interview repeats the fact that the people with the actual first-hand knowledge of Max Spiers' death, their opinion is that it wasn't murder, it wasn't foul play, it was an accidental drug overdose. It is very important to know that at every turn, Kerry Cassidy, during this interview, refuses to hear that truth because she clearly desires and wants there to be a grander conspiracy, for it to be foul play, and for it to be murder. My suggestion, which is an opinion, and you will decide for yourselves at home what you believe, is that Kerry Cassidy has an agenda, whether she's aware of it consciously or whether it is a simply subconscious agenda, to have controversy, because controversy generates views. I also want to note that at 2 points in the interview, Miles Johnston remarks that he has reached out to Max's Spiers' mom and left a voicemail where he was decent enough to ask her whether or not she wanted, what information she wanted about Max Spiers' death to be published and what she wanted to remain private. It is clear during the course of the interview that Miles Johnston has not yet heard back from Max's Spiers' mom. What do we make of that? You have the common decency to say to a person whose son has just passed, reach out to them and leave a voicemail to say, what do you want published, what do you not want published, what do you want kept discreet? But then, remember, the interview with Kerry Cassidy that he performs is the second interview he does the day of, the first full day after Max Spiers has been found dead. So you have the common decency to ask his mother what she wants or doesn't want discussed, but you don't have the common decency to wait for an answer. Why? I believe the reason is patently obvious. They wanted to get out there. They wanted to have their interviews and video out there first and foremost. Why? What could be the possible agenda? What is the need to rush? Are there lives at stake? Are other people going to be whacked? No. It's because it's news, it's juicy, and it generates views. And views for monetized channels equals moolah. One man's opinion, folks. So Miles Johnston comes on, not knowing that he's being interviewed, not knowing that they're going out live, clearly states to Kerry Cassidy exactly what he had stated to Christina Joan Hart earlier in the day, that it wasn't murder, stop asking and acting like it was murder, it was an accident. Miles Johnston is a highly influenceable person, especially when the person doing the influencing has a vagina. I've said it before and I've said it again. This man apparently is powerless against women. He stands up and says that it was an accident. If you pressure him and push him, he's going to then go and play your tune. Conjecture and opinion, take it for what it is. It takes a while for the interview to get going. My first noted timestamp occurs at 32 minutes and 45 seconds in, where Miles Johnston complains. He's complaining about Max Spiers and Sarah Rachel Adams and the influence that they had on the Basis project. This was shocking to me and interesting to me because if you look at the view count on Basis interviews, it is very clear that Sarah Rachel Adams and Max Spiers interviews are some of the highest number generators there that he's got going. But he complains at 32 minutes and 45 seconds, and I think this testimony is telling. I think it tells us a lot, and it bears analysis. 32 minutes and 45 seconds in, he complains. He complains that he recently, for his latest Bases convention, has lost his headline speaker, Cara St. Louis. Cara St. Louis has apparently dropped out because she has told Miles Johnston that Max Spiers was quote-unquote stealing her material. Specifically, the fact that Max Spiers had begun testifying about the Fae. Fairies. I think it's interesting to note also that Cara St. Louis has a new book coming out involving the Fae folk, and it was apparently for this reason that she dropped out. She didn't want to be involved where Max would be quote-unquote stealing her material. I think it's important to pause here and note that Cara St. Louis, in many interviews that she has done recently, or last couple of years, including interviews done with Randy Moggins, has stated that she is in direct contact, speaks with, and takes the spiritual counsel of one Jay Essex. I think that's interesting because, as we all know, as I know, because I'm I am the world's foremost expert on Jay Essex. I fucking am. I've seen all of this motherfucker's goddamn interviews. I love me some Jay Essex. I can't turn away. I call him the Captain Beefheart of conspiracy theory. He is out there. He's got his own unique take on everything. He's a walking tableau. He's a walking piece of art. I think that he is as interesting to look at as Jackson Pollock or a aquarium screensaver. I just can't look away. It's just that tantalizing. Jay Essex's testimony is that as Ara, super god of the millennium, he was responsible for creating the Fae folk. Interesting, to say the least. A side note, but interesting to note, to say these people are all interconnected. One guy starts the story, passes it to another, it goes round, and before you know it, you've heard Fae folk over here, Jinn over here, giants over here, super empaths over here, super soldier, Fae, super soldier, disclosure. And before you know it, you've had it coming from so many different directions, it just takes on the ping of legitimacy. Everybody's talking about it. But when you take stock and take a step back, you realize that quote-unquote everybody is a coterie and handful of speakers, researchers, and testimony givers. Back to the interview. 33 minutes and 20 seconds. Max again had referred to the Fae folk, and this was offensive to Cara St. Louis. Now listen to what Miles Johnston says. So I insisted that Max come up with his own material. That is so interesting because, look, folks, does that sound like someone who's interested in bringing legitimate research and information to the public? Information and research that everybody is saying is desperately important for the survival of humanity? Or does that sound like a rock and roll producer or a promoter or a manager? So I insisted that Max come up with his own material. Hey, if you find out that Max is stealing and cribbing his notes, then you've just discovered that Max is not a legitimate contactee and researcher, right? And if Max is not a legitimate and he's not a researcher, right? Max Spiers was testifying to his own experience, supposedly in my lab experiences, in fighting, being a super soldier trained to fight on the astral plane where he's got to fight the Fourth Reich and, there's Vril and all this crap. And so he's not, how could he have, if you discover that he's not legit, then why are you putting him on? Why would you pull him aside and say, come up with your own material? And that's Miles Johnston's own words. If I'm lying, I'm dying. 33 minutes and 20 seconds, that's what he says that he says to Max. So I insisted Max come up with his own material. Why would you insist on that? If you discover that he doesn't have his own material, you simply say to him, Max, my boy, listen. We're not here to play games. We're not here to entertain. I'm going to have to say bye-bye. I'm going to have to say you're no longer invited to participate in the Basis Project in anything other than a audience member capacity. Sorry, son. That's the reality. And what are you doing encouraging to come up with his quote-unquote own material? Miles Johnston right there, whether he's conscious or unconscious of the fact, is basically telling the world that when presented with an illegitimate resource is basically saying, just gin it up, right? Come up with new shit. Come up with new material. It's not the only time he says it. Miles Johnston's got a nice personality. I can see why people would like him. Okay? But the fact of the matter is that if we're involved in the generation of legitimate information, the exploration of legitimate research, and you discover that Miles Johnston is behaving this way, the appropriate action is not to come and troll upon videos of people who are skeptical about Miles Johnston. The appropriate thing to do is to put the Basis Project material in context. The appropriate thing to do may be to unsubscribe to the Basis Project. Of course, Max denies knowledge of Cara St. Louis, 33 minutes and 50 seconds. How could you deny, if you're Max Spiers, how could you deny knowledge of Cara St. Louis? Cara St. Louis and Harold Kutzvella are the mother and father of the artificial intelligence black goo that was the de facto news story of the Basis Project circa 2013, 2014. Am I right, folks, or am I right? Basis Project was the home of artificial intelligence black goo. That's where Cara St. Louis did countless Basis interview, as did Harold Kutzvella. We know for a fact that Max Spiers and Harold Kutzvella hung out with Sarah Rachel Adams, right? They did. If I'm lying, I'm dying. That's a verifiable fact. So the notion that Max Spiers is going to say that he denies the knowledge of Cara St. Louis, or that he's going to deny that knowledge to Miles Johnston, and Miles Johnston is going to say anything other than, what are you, fucking crazy? Of course you know about Cara St. Louis and her material. I know you do because I was there when you guys fucking met. 34 minutes and 4 seconds. Kerry Cassidy. He has made a lot of progress since I first interviewed him. This is her referring to Max Spiers. I think that that's telling as well. If you're interviewing eyewitnesses to a crime or a conspiracy, there's no need for that person to have performance skills. Okay? It is only necessary if you are presenting a mediated product. My theory, what do you think? 35 minutes and 50 seconds. Kerry Cassidy. She starts talking about how James Casbolt and James Casbolt and Max Spiers, when she interviewed them, were making predictions about a race war. Well, this was because James Casbolt's a certified super freak. That guy is like nuts. And he was saying that there was going to be a race war. Then Kerry Cassidy speculates about the recent Black Lives Matter tragedy where a crazed individual armed with a gun recently started shooting at and assassinated a couple of police officers in the United States of America. She speculates that this could be the start of the race war or evidence that their prediction was correct and true. That's insane for a lot of reasons. Number one, there is no race war occurring in America. Any appeal to mainstream media or even alternative media, besides Alex Jones, would clearly indicate that there is no race war in America occurring. There was one isolated tragedy. There is racial tension. Yeah, America is a melting pot but it's more like a gumbo than a broth, and things bubble to the surface, and tastes and cultures clash all the time. That's the reality of being human. But there's no reason to believe that any of the stories coming true. Also, Charlie Manson famously predicted a race war. That was part of his agenda. That's what they were trying to do in the Manson murders. They were going to start helter skelter. They were going to start murdering rich white people, so that the rich white people will become paranoid, and white people will become paranoid of African American people, and start a race war. If a race war were to occur in 2019, would that mean that Charlie Manson had made a successful prediction? Listen, folks, if you saw my last video, a lot of this stuff will be repetitious, and I apologize about that, but it's just the way that it is. We're just doing home repair here. Of course it wouldn't. The fact of the matter is that individuals like William Mount, Charlie Manson, Alex Jones, James Casbolt, Max Spiers, they are trying to sell a story, so they have to sell a story that makes sense. So they look at the zeitgeist of the time, where the possible problems, where the possible things that people are feeling anxious about, the economy collapsing, FEMA camps, racial tension, violence, military overthrow of the constitutional republic and replaced with a one world despotism. Okay? And they take that and they pontificate and make predictions on that. Sometimes bad things happen, sometimes governments fall. If you make enough predictions, eventually some of those predictions are going to come out to be true. But the fact that she would say that this prediction is any way, shape, or form coming true indicates the following. To me, number one, she's of a paranoid personality. She's looking out and she's seeing things that aren't there. Number two, she has an agenda. She wants to create media controversy, and she wants to create anxiety in their audience so that people will think that this is invaluable information that they should be following. It's not. Kerry Cassidy at 37 minutes and 12 seconds makes reference to a researcher, and I always slaughter this guy's name, Oleg Demigard. I apologize. I wrote down his name incorrectly. Him, like Jim Fetzer, is a researcher not to be believed. They recently wrote a book called, together, him and Jim Fetzer, called I Suppose We Didn't Land on the Moon Either. He is absolutely a fringe researcher, and they think everything is a false flag. Kerry Cassidy says that she thinks the recent Islamic terrorism in France at 37 minutes and 12 seconds. Kerry Cassidy, that France, this recent attack in Nice, France, over on Bastille Day, was a false flag. Are you serious? A crazed Islamic terrorist gets behind the wheel of a truck and drives through a crowd. How, in what way, in shape, or form is there any evidence to suggest that that's a false flag? According to these individuals, there's no death that's not a murder. There's no media or violent event that's not a false flag. It's all a conspiracy. The minute anybody says things like everything, the minute someone starts talking in absolutes, right? You know that it's not true because that's not the way the world works, right? According to Alex Jones and the likes of Kerry Cassidy, every violent attack in America is a false flag, as if people don't have the capacity in a world full of guns and trucks to go crazy, nuts, and kill other people, right? She says there's evidence all over the place that if you know how to research and read it, that's obvious that the attacks in France were a false flag. No, only if you're the type of person that thinks everything is a false flag. And that's the problem with Kerry Cassidy. She's not a legitimate researcher. She's not a trained journalist. She's not a trained researcher. And she doesn't know what she's talking about. She doesn't know how to properly vet information and stories. And she presents everything, every piece of garbage, as reality. And that muddies the water, and it creates not clarity, it creates delusion. It creates not enlightenment, it creates delusion. It's not appropriate. 39 minutes and 22 seconds. Christina Joan Hart. First of all, here's the problem with Miles Johnston. He's got no fucking loyalty at all. He has no loyalty at all. Christina Joan Hart, if people don't know, she works in close association with Miles Johnston. Okay? Miles Johnston is constantly interviewed on her radio show, Queen of Hearts. The Queen of Hearts radio broadcast is republished on the Bases Project on Miles Johnston's YouTube channel as part and parcel of the whole Miles Johnson Bases Project, phenomena. Christine Joan Hart contacted Miles Johnston and asked 39 minutes and 22 seconds whether or not Max Spiers was murdered. Miles Johnston, reflecting on the real-time conversation I had with Christina Joan Hart, repeated, just like he repeated to Kerry Cassidy at the beginning of this interview that we're analyzing. He says, no, according to the people on the scene, Monica, the woman who owned the apartment where Max Spiers OD'd, obviously, it was just death by misadventure. It was just an accident. But then there's some weird speculation, because Christina Joan Hart says, was it murder? Was it murder? Was it murder? Miles Johnston says a second time, he says to her, no, leave it alone. It was just an accident. But then Miles Johnston starts saying some nutty things about Christine Joan Hart that indicate that Miles Johnston is not very loyal to the people that provide information and data for his monetization and his own self-promotion. Miles Johnston says that Christina Joan Hart was MI6, and once an agent, always an agent. And then he refers to her as a penniless, broke, single mother. If I'm lying, I'm dying, folks. Look at the Miles Johnston YouTube channel and look at the amount of content that's provided there by Christine Joan Hart. And then ask yourself, is this what you would expect a coworker to say about you in a public forum and interview? Also, using your context clues, if you review what he's saying at 39 minutes and 22 seconds, it's unclear, but it could be taken and interpreted as saying that Christine Joan Hart may have had something to do with the death of Max Spiers, because Max Spiers' final British radio broadcast was on the Queen of Hearts radio program, and that maybe there was a financial incentive. I don't want to speculate too much. I'll give you the timestamp. You can go back and review the testimony and make your own decision as to what happened, what was being suggested or not being suggested. Words are subject to interpretation. 40 minutes. Kerry Cassidy repeats that as an intuitive, she knows that this is murder. I've said it before and I've said it again, folks. It's not enough that Kerry Cassidy has started off, doing interviews with Bill Ryan of these various whistleblowers, and she was a quote-unquote researcher. Now we all know she does her own interviews. She's giving her own testimony regarding alien species and alien races, and now she's a psychic intuitive, right? She's got skills. I dare say I am of a contrary opinion. I think that Kerry Cassidy is the opposite of an intuitive person. I don't think she has the ability to know and understand what's going on, and I think clearly what we'll see through the course of this interview as we go through the testimony is that she has a subconscious agenda. That's all these people who think they're psychic, they're seeing what they want to see. They're intuitive because, oh, I know it's murder. We're all intuitive. We all have, oh, what happened? Oh, I know what happened. She's cheating on you, dude. We all have, we go and Barack Obama, he knew it was a lie. We all jump to these conclusions based on our own mind, putting together our own subjective opinions. And you'll see through the course of the interview that constant information and data is being presented that clearly indicates that Max Spiers died of an accidental drug overdose. She can't hear it. Because whether it's a conscious or subconscious agenda, she needs it and clearly wants it to be murder. Why? She's running a gossip rag. There's got to be information. You got to have blood to, to get the people to put chum in the water so the audience comes around. Nobody wants to hear about an accidental drug overdose. No, we all want to hear that Max Spiers was a clone, and he had a clone in Turkey that was activated as a super secret assassin and did this, that, and the other thing. Max Spiers, God bless him, was a human being. James Casbolt, Max Spiers, Sarah Rachel Adams, Shane, Corey Good. There is no reason at Andrew Bashago, there's no reason at all to believe that these people are anything other than storytellers. Evidence, data, and clues are the hallmark of living in reality, okay? Look at the John F. Kennedy assassination. Look at the assassination of Martin Luther King. There's shells on the ground. There's footprints. There's photographic evidence. There's travel logs and records indicating that people were at certain places that journalists and researchers can put together and make conjectures, oftentimes arising at different opinions, oftentimes just feeding you data that you need to analyze yourself. But these people are all defined by one thing and one thing only. The only evidence to the veracity of their story, the only evidence to their truth, is the words coming out of their mouths. James Casbolt takes a strange photo with a group of West Point high school kids in an unmatching uniform, and that's taken as proof that he was somehow involved in a military program. Andrew Bashago points to a grainy black and white photo of a kid before in the Civil War times, and that's taken as evidence that he was a legitimate time traveler. There's a wreckage of an outpost in Antarctica, where there's wreckage of a small outpost based up on the Montauk military base, and that's taken as evidence of an alien attack or a monster who slipped through the time belt. It's laughable. It doesn't make any sense. Discernment, discernment, discernment. Yeah, you should have discernment. The bigger the event, the more likely that it would produce information and discoverable data. Evidence. "42 minutes and 18 seconds. Why didn't Monica call the ambulance immediately?" This is Miles Johnston contemplating why Monica, who owned the apartment where Max Spiers OD'd, why didn't she call the ambulance immediately? I think that it's legitimate to suggest that the fact that an ambulance wasn't called immediately is evidentiary support, not of foul play, not of conspiracy. In fact, if there was foul play or conspiracy, Miles Johnston essentially would be accusing Monica of being the actress, correct? Because if she's the one who failed to call the ambulance immediately, and it wasn't for another reason, and it was for a conspiratorial reason, then you've just accused Monica of actually being the one who killed Max Spiers. I can't think of another legitimate conclusion other than the more obvious fact of what we all know. Are we all adults here? I've said it in my last video. I'm sorry if this is repetitious. Certainly it's repetitious and not quite as funny and entertaining in its delivery, but we all know why people don't call ambulances right away. That's because someone's having a drug overdose. When you're having a drug overdose, if you're having a legitimate medical condition like a heart attack or a stroke or a broken bone or a cut, you call the ambulance immediately because you need help immediately. The only time you don't call an ambulance immediately when someone is in medical distress is when there's an agenda to not want the authorities to know about what's going on in that apartment. There's only one time a person who's dying tells people not to call an ambulance, and that's when they're having a drug overdose. Why? Because you don't want the authorities showing up on the scene and discovering your drugs, and you don't want to go to the hospital on a drug overdose because they're going to make you go to rehab. They're going to make you go to the hospital. They're maybe take you to jail, and you're not going to be able to do drugs anymore. That's the facts. Doesn't that make more sense than foul play? Or maybe I'm just COINTELPRO trying to throw you off the track. Ooh. 42 minutes and 40 seconds. Miles Johnston. Monica says he was completely drug-free and clean and off all the drugs at the time that he died. Again, 42 minutes and 40 seconds. Monica says he, being Max Spiers, was completely drug-free and clean and off all of the drugs at the time that he passed away. Folks, You don't say that about a person unless the person has a reputation for being a drug user. Am I correct? We all have friends and family who are totally clean and sober. I've got a brother, okay? He's a born again Christian and he's never had a sip of alcohol in his life. At the time of his passing, which God willing will be sometime never, 110 years from now, no one is ever going to suggest, unless he starts doing drugs and alcohol, that he was completely drug free or comment upon him being drug free or alcohol free at the time of his passing, because that's not his reputation, okay? You only say that and talk about someone being completely drug free and clean if they were previously not drug free and clean. Yet more evidentiary support. And then he also says that someone else had said that Max had been given something which had killed him. In the context, it's clear that someone had given him drugs. We will get to further information and story, further elucidating that piece of the puzzle. So again, the ambulance is not called right away. My suspicion and conjecture, take it for what it's worth, is that that's one piece of evidence clearly supporting the conclusion that Max Spiers died of a drug overdose, because that's the only time that people say don't call an ambulance, right? You only don't call an ambulance if you just shot someone and you want to clean up the body, or if someone's having a fucking drug overdose. Number two, he had been given something. He was completely drug-free at the time of his passing. Well, I guess not. Again, more evidence that evidentiary support for the fact that it wasn't foul play, it wasn't murder, it was death by misadventure, it was a drug overdose. And look, having a drug overdose is something that happens to people, okay? I'm not of the opinion that having a drug addiction or substance abuse problem makes you a piece of garbage, okay? I've often commented that I have my own problem with alcohol. I do. I accept that about myself. I accept that and know that is a truth for me. Okay? I don't think that makes you terrible. And also, we all know this world is made, especially this little community, is made up of dreamers, right? And dreamers oftentimes suffer from writer's disease and artist's disease. A lot of us have substance abuse problems and drug problems and alcohol problems. A lot of us have missing pieces inside. A lot of us have pain. And a lot of us are just adventurers engaged in a wild number of pursuits of a libertine and libertarian bent. More evidence. 43 minutes and 57 seconds. Kerry Cassidy is clueless. Look at all the information we just went through, clearly indicating that Max Spiers died of a accidental drug overdose. Miles Johnston twice at this point has said that it was an accident, that it wasn't foul play, it wasn't murder, no one should go down that road. Max Spiers has already shared us more information regarding evidentiary support that Max Spiers had a pre-existing drug problem that he may have relapsed. Okay, that happens. Lenny, I'm busy, bro. I love you, but you're killing me. My cat. It's awesome, but just fine. Get up here. So, okay. Kerry Cassidy is clueless into information. As I said, she's the opposite of intuitive. She has her ears closed to the truth, her heart closed to the truth. She's got an agenda. She says she ignores all the prior info and says that whatever he was taking, and she keeps on wanting to say that, act like he was taking, regular old medication. You know what I mean? Like he was on Cialis or something. Or that, he was on some sort of blood thinner or diabetes medication. Then she even suggests that maybe he was killed with radiation. No, girl, he died of a drug overdose. That's what happened. 48 minutes and 12 seconds. Guess what? Stuart Swirlo makes an appearance. As we all know, I made a video previous to this video critical of the handling of the Max Spiers passing by certain people and parties, including Kerry Cassidy, including Miles Johnston, and also including the likes of Stuart Swirlo. It's my point to say that if you look at the way that these people handled this tragedy, they did so in a way that raises the question of whether or not they are engaged in the mourning or passing or analysis of Max Spiers the man, and rather are engaged in acts of shameless self-promotion. It also goes to show you that if you look at the information that Stuart Swerdlow has shared in his Facebook and website, he's the guy who broke the news about Max Spiers' passing. He had information and things to say about Sarah Rachel Adams. Disparaging comments to say about Sarah Rachel Adams. Also disparaging comments to say about Max Spiers. Max Spiers was troubled at the time of his passing. Classy. Who says that about a guy who just recently died? As well as saying that Sarah Rachel Adams was Max Spiers' handler at the time of Max Spiers' death, and she was quote unquote not to be trusted. Listen, I don't trust Stuart Swerdlow either. I think he's a fantasist. I think he's making up the whole Montauk Project story. I think he's got all sorts of issues, and I think he's, like all these other people, engaged in the monetization of spiritual technology and conspiracy information. Okay? That's how he makes his living, through lecture appearances and consultations with people. He has his own set of agendas, and it gets real fucking interesting at this point, folks. Hang on to your fucking conspiracy, your tinfoil hats, because we're about to go deep into some legitimate, crazy information. If you want to talk about information about alleged allegations regarding foul play in the death of Max Spiers and whether or not there's players on the chessboard who could legitimately be pointed to as maybe having a part directly or indirectly with this tragic passing of this young man. Good looking kid, Max Spiers. You know what I mean? Good looking kid. In the leather jacket and the jeans. Could have been an actor. Good looking kid. Good speaker too. Stuart Swerdlow. 48 minutes and 12 seconds. It's revealed that Stuart Swerdlow was in Poland hanging out with Max Spiers, and that Sarah Rachel Adams told Miles Johnston in conversation that Stuart Swerdlow's wife had been giving Max Spiers prescription medication. "48 minutes and 12 seconds. Rewind the tape, play it back yourself. If I'm lying, I'm dying." According to Sarah Rachel Adams, Stuart Swerdlow's wife was giving Max Spiers prescription medication. Stuart Swerdlow's wife is not an MD or a doctor of osteopathy. To my understanding, she's not a registered nurse. To my understanding, there's no reason why she would be having any reason to be giving Max Spiers prescription medication. Also, Stuart Swerdlow has disclosed in other interviews, especially I think an interview that he did with the Leak Project, that he has, on the east and west coast of the United States of America, sponsors. A sponsor is a part of the NA and AA 12-step recovery program. I'll say it again. Stuart Swerdlow, if Stuart Swerdlow is actively in recovery and has sponsors, what is he doing with a wife who's giving out prescription medication without a license to anybody? That's a recipe for fucking disaster. That's a recipe for a drug overdose. 50 minutes in, Sarah Rachel Adams and Max Spiers. Oh no, here we go. So there you go, folks. Yet more information. Is it starting to sound like a drug overdose? Is it starting to sound like all the pieces are pointing in one direction and one direction only? I'm not going to talk about this nonsensical story about Max Spiers having black goo or fluid coming from his body. That just seems like some made up nonsense that just entered the fray in order to pull it all together into this kind of conspiratorial bullshit. Or maybe Max Spiers was coming out of the bathroom at Monica's apartment after having done drugs and says, I've got black goo coming out of my body, and that's why I'm in the bathroom so long. It makes no sense, but we'll all know because the body was taken to the hospital. So if there was tons of crazy viscous fluid, we'll clearly hear about it in the medical inquest. Oh, of course we won't, because if that information is not disclosed, are some people in the conspiracy theory community just going to simply say, "See, it's a cover-up. Of course they didn't find anything." Ay. You can't win, folks. I'm banging my head against the wall, and I know it, but that's okay. Also, Stuart Swerdlow is coming out on the internet and saying that Max Spiers was troubled. Well, look, it sounds like we have evidence, and we're starting to find out that Stuart Swerdlow might have an agenda. Maybe not even just in the form of self-promotion or an agenda. It might be an agenda of self-protection, a protection of him and his wife, to start laying the groundwork for some explanation of the death, other than it being the result of prescription medication that was being provided to Max Spiers by Stuart Swerdlow's wife. Okay? Now, it's even important to point out that Max Spiers had made Facebook posts, I believe, where there's information online posted to Facebook that he was commenting to people in private chats that Stuart Swerdlow had quote-unquote stung him being Max Spiers, with Stuart Swerdlow's scorpion tail. Now, Stuart Swerdlow does have a reputation in this alternative media community of someone who, it's been alleged, would engage in acts of black magic or psychic attack on his adversaries or enemies. Folks, people have reputations in this world by this point in time. Stuart Swerdlow has been out on the conspiracy theory scene, first as a member of the Montauk Project, now as the, grandnephew of the first leader of the Communist Party, or the KGB, founding the KGB. It's just fantastical. The guy gets, it's interesting when people's stories get more and more interesting over time. You'd figure that all the information about their disclosure, all the information about his stuff would have come out at the time of his involvement in the Montauk Project, but it's just gotten better, folks. Evidence that he's just creating a story? I would dare say so, because that's not how life really works, right? Your life doesn't get more interesting over time. You get your disclosure, you have your adventures in your youth, and then you tell people about those stories. You don't, keep on having new fantastical stories unless it's your business to have new and fantastical stories that you can keep on telling. We're going to switch tracks here for a second. 50 minutes in, Miles Johnston starts again complaining about Max Spiers, not taking this opportunity to praise Max Spiers, talk about what he brought to the Basis Project. Look at the interview. Is Miles Johnston praising Max Spiers? Is he acting like Max Spiers and Sarah Rachel Adams really helped out the Basis Project with all their legitimate information and first-hand knowledge of MyLab and the artificial intelligence black goo? No. At 50 minutes in, Miles Johnston is complaining about Sarah Rachel Adams and Max Spiers. He says they were like a double act. And then at one point he says that he felt like they had, quote-unquote, bum-rushed the show, right? Or forced themselves in or shoehorned themselves into one of the early Basis conspiracy conventions, that happens before an audience of like 25 people. He says that they began to like that, meaning being in the public eye, giving testimony to large audiences regarding their experiences. This is Miles Johnston speaking, 50 minutes in. Go to the point in the tape, look at it yourself. I was not happy because I wanted them to come up with new material. I didn't say it. Miles Johnston said it. What do you mean? He's encouraging people to come up with new material, and if you don't have new material, I guess you don't get the spotlight that Miles Johnston says people begin to like. Is it starting to make sense, folks? Are you getting a feeling for how the Basis Project works? Here's my thesis. Here's my conjecture. Miles Johnston finds young individuals, primarily. Sure, there's going to be a Peter Paget. Sure, there's going to be a Cara St. Louis. But the bread and butter of the Basis Project is young men and women under the age of 30 who clearly seem like they're in a fragile or fractured psychological state of mind. Miles Johnston gets them, encourages them to disclose, feeds them information, and tells them what to testify about. And if they don't testify and bring new material, they're not invited again. You want to get invited back? You're going to have to come up with a new story. That's not someone who's interested in discovering the truth. That's not the actions of a journalist. That's the actions of a promoter who's trying to put on the latest and greatest hip-hop, rock and roll production. That's a guy who's trying to put bums in the seats, man. Bums in the seats. It's a story as old as time itself. Does it make sense? Does my explanation seem logical? He says it himself. I was not happy. He felt that they had shoehorned their way into the Basis project again. He says, literally, he says, just because you appear twice doesn't mean you're guaranteed a slot. You got to make that money, honey. You got to come up with new material. So I was giving Max a lot of pressure to make sure he wasn't just copying other people. I wanted real hard material, new material. Those are Miles Johnston's words, his own words himself. I didn't put those words in his mouth, he said them. So I was giving Max a lot of pressure to make sure he wasn't just copying other people. 50 minutes and 50 seconds. I wanted real hard material, new material. As I said, folks, if Max Spiers is there testifying to his real life experiences, what he saw with his own eyes, heard with his own ears, smelled with his own fucking schnoz, and felt with his own body regarding his experiences of my lab abductee, right? Like, what's that guy from the Fire in the Sky? You know, Trevor Walton? That dude got abducted once, right? If you have him at the UFO convention, do you expect him to have new material? No, you expect him to testify about the one fucking thing, the one time they did bring him up in the ass poking machine in space, whatever the fuck happened to that dude. He's another guy who lied. So I was giving Max a lot of pressure to make sure he wasn't just copying. I'm repeating myself for a reason, folks. So I was giving Max a lot of pressure to make sure he wasn't just copying other people. I wanted real hard material, new material. This is the second time that we hear the statement by Miles Johnston that he's suspecting that Max Spiers is copying other people's material. His story was so identical to James Casbolt, they ended up in the same fucking project together. Remember, folks? Those guys were linked at the fucking hip for a reason. Max Spiers basically took James Casbolt's story, kind of with James Casbolt's permission, because I think these guys were bros. Right? I think they were mosquito asshole tight. I think they were fucking best fucking friends. So the second time that it suggested that he's copying other people's material again, is the legitimate response from Miles Johnston when he's discovered that Max Spiers is copying other people's material, is the legitimate behavior of a researcher to allow that person to testify again under any circumstances, or is the legitimate rationale to have Miles Johnston say to Max Spiers, "You're no longer invited. I'm sorry. I'm not going to have you testify." Again, I wanted, moving on to the second point, I wanted real hard material, new material, meaning knowing that Max Spiers might have a legitimacy problem with his story and his tale of my lab woe. Is Miles Johnston turning him off? No, he says, you're more than welcome to keep on testifying as long as you have real hard material, new material, juicy material. Right, folks? Is it any surprise that Max Spiers went further and further down the rabbit hole that was once the story of being a My Lab abductee, of being born in some sort of weird program with James Casbolt to create these fucking super soldiers who are as impressive as not anything, right? He's encouraging these guys just finding out that the guy has a legitimacy problem and a veracity problem. Does he say you're not going to testify? He says, no, you can testify as long as you come up with something new. How the fuck do you come up with something new if you're testifying about your real life experience? And is your reaction to this video going to be, I love Miles Johnston because Miles Johnston is telling me that my experiences as a targeted individual are legitimate, therefore fuck you C.W. Chanter? Or is your response to say, you know what, you're right. Thinking about it, putting everything in context, number one, Max Spiers clearly died of an accidental overdose. I don't want to be involved in disparaging a dead person's name or kicking around a young man's death like a soccer ball, so I'm not going to be involved in this conspiracy theory from the Basis Project material standpoint. I'm going to unsubscribe from Basis Project. What are you going to do? I don't know. That's up to you. God bless you. 51 minutes. Miles Johnston told Sarah Rachel Adams. You know, Sarah Rachel Adams apparently hit him and her and Max Spiers at one point a very tight couple, apparently had been broken up for 2.5 months. I think it's telling, and I've said it before and I'm going to say it again, based on the amount of information, that amount of times that Sarah Rachel Adams and Max Spiers appeared on the Miles Johnston program, The Basis Project, and his YouTube channel, I would think that Miles Johnston would have had a parental or at least avuncular influence on these people's lives and would have stayed involved in their lives. If you're looking at the presentation of Miles Johnston when he's talking to people like Gabe Cruz, when he's talking to people like Max Spiers, when he's talking to people like James Casbolt, one would get the impression that they, the children testifying, certainly seem to feel as though Miles Johnston is going to take care of them, that he's going to somehow, some way, shape, or form act in a protective way. But clearly we can see based on Miles Johnston's testimony that he's lost contact with Sarah Rachel Adams and Max Spiers. He's not staying on top of them. He's not really clear on how they broke up, and he's the one who tells Sarah Rachel Adams, apparently by phone, of Max Spiers' passing. That's a hard way to hear about it. Maybe she heard about it from the internet from Stuart Swerdlow, who handled it so classy. Sarah Rachel Adams, according to the testimony of Miles Johnston, says that she's angry about the Swerdlow connection and drugs. 51 minutes into the interview, Kerry Cassidy interviewing Miles Johnston. Miles Johnston testifies that Sarah Rachel Adams was angry about the Swerdlow connection and drugs. 52 minutes and 34 seconds, Kerry Cassidy, using her psychic intuitive abilities, reads the Google Plus chat and says, "Oh no, that couldn't be because the chat people in the chat don't believe it. Like that fucking matters because the Swerdlows are into organics." Again, all of this is pinned by Miles Johnston onto Sarah Rachel Adams. It sounds like Miles Johnston could have easily said his own information about the Stuart-Swerdlow connection and this whether or not he believed or didn't believe that the Swerdlows had provided Max Spiers with drugs. But why do that when you can just pin it all on poor Sarah Rachel Adams, a life coach who needs a life coach? No offense, I'm not here to insult anybody or slam anybody, but yikes. 53 minutes and 30 seconds. Kerry Cassidy, still clueless, is still suspicious, and she still knows that it's murder. Do you think that it's murder at this point? Let's reflect. All the information that we've looked at and gone over so far, what do you think right now? Was Max Spiers murdered, or was it an accidental drug overdose? What do you think? And you know what? The important thing to realize is this. You can look at your own answer, and you can use it as a springboard for self-analysis. What is the first idea and thought that comes to your mind? Was it murder and foul play, or was it a drug overdose? And then you can say to yourself, why do I think that? Because there's part of me that wants this mysterious and conspiracy and aliens and Vril and cloning programs to be true. That would make life more exciting, right? And if you can have fights on the astral plane, isn't that just like spirituality and religion? And aren't you maybe possibly thinking about these things in a spiritual and religious context? Because just like everybody else who thinks that Jesus Christ is going to save them from eternal damnation, they're going to live forever in heaven, and just like the Buddha and the Buddhist or the Hindu who thinks that they're going to be involved in reincarnation, to believe in the mystical and magical makes the world mystical and magical. Lord knows that's why I put any faith in mysticism and magic, which I put a lot of faith in it, even though I know it's not true. My own 2 cents. 54 minutes and 45 seconds. Kerry Cassidy. How could anyone think that this could be construed as an accident in any way? Folks, you know what? Really? That's the point. Kerry Cassidy at 54 minutes and 45 seconds. How could anyone think that this was an accident? We've been talking for over an hour about how all the evidence adds up to one inevitable conclusion. And even if you don't think that it's an inevitable conclusion, are you going to tell me that there's not evidence that suggests that it's a legitimate possibility that Max Spiers died of a drug overdose? But Kerry Cassidy makes this crazy statement because that's what Kerry Cassidy does. I'm not here to besmirch Kerry Cassidy. I'm not here to insult Kerry Cassidy. But she might not be Despite the, you can be a closed-minded person in this conspiracy theory world. If you're saying things like, how could anyone construe this as an accident, that doesn't mean that you're open-minded. That means that you're closed-minded. If your mind is closed to certain possibilities, then your mind can't go there to do the research to suggest or to weigh that possible evidentiary support. Does she have a subconscious or conscious agenda? Let's resolve all questions in her favor. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt and just say that either she's clueless or she's got a subconscious agenda. She wants this to be true. Why might she want this to be true? Remember, she was trying to turn Project Camelot TV into the people's voice, remember? It seems like that she may have accepted that may not come to fruition. But I remember all of last year was about Project Camelot TV, right? They were going to have a cable channel or an internet TV station, right? That was going to be basically like an analog to David Icke's The People's Voice in England, which wasn't a success because despite the fact that these people think that they've got huge numbers of people and huge number of people waking up, let me tell you something, folks. If you pan around, if you pay attention to the photos of these internet or these UFO conferences, these seminars. Look at the audience. It's a paltry number of people. Okay? You look at the number of videos, you look at the number of subscribers of Project Camelot, and you become very impressed. Holy shit, I'd be impressed. I would love those subscription numbers, but guess what? If you then compare that to the subscription numbers for Alex Jones even, or if you look at the subscription numbers or the number of views that a Kim Kardashian butt photo or butt, video gets on YouTube, it puts things in perspective. And you realize this isn't a huge world of an audience of everybody's waking up and everybody's waking up and everybody's waking up. No. People are as suspicious as they always have been. You can look at polls from the 1980s about how many people thought that JFK was assassinated by agents of the U.S. government or the mafia or the Cubans or whatever. People have always been suspicious. People were suspicious about the Freemasons back in the days of the Revolutionary War. Okay? There ain't nothing new under the sun. The John Birch Society, where did that go? Ron Paul for president, where the fuck did that go? Bernie Sanders didn't even, folks, wake up. Anyway, 55 minutes, so there's my point. See how it is. 55 minutes, a strange woman named Sandra enters the conversation for some reason. Again, like I said, where Miles Johnston goes, there's always vagina. For whatever reason, if you've got, listen, I don't know. It's just the way, it's what I've put together. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just seeing something that's not there, but that seems to be the case. You can check it out yourself. 55 minutes, Sandra enters the conversation, apparently because she had recent contact with Max Spiers back on the 29th of June. Well, look, I guess that she's got some information, she's some knowledge. Kerry Cassidy says, yeah. Kerry Cassidy starts talking about the death of Prince and Robin Williams in the sense that it's valuable, I guess, to have testimony or talk to people that were there around the time of their death. I wonder what Kerry Cassidy thinks about the death of Prince and the death of Robin Williams. Well, I wonder if folks, I didn't even get this. Think about it. She mentions Prince and Robin Williams. What do we know about the death of Prince and what do we know about the death of Robin Williams? Just like the death of Max Spiers, obvious drug overdoses that instead of being called drug overdoses, because why would you want to call it a drug overdose? Just like Cass Sunstein said, why would you want to waste a good tragedy? Am I bringing it all home for you folks? One more time. Remember that? Remember that line? Why would you want to waste a good tragedy? That's what they say about September 11th. That's what they say about all this stuff, that the powers that be exploit these terrible terroristic events. And who else exploits? Prince, Robin Williams, death of Max Spiers, the conspiracy world, right? Oh, Prince died of chemtrail poisoning. Oh, Prince died because he was telling the truth about chemtrails. Why? Because in an Arsenio Hall interview from 2001, 15 years before his death, he mentioned chemtrails once. It's nuts. Robin Williams, another obvious suicide that people like conspiracy theorists like Stephen Molyneux want to jump all over and make all sorts of conjectures and points of. And I wonder if this is going to happen to poor Max Spiers. I wonder if just like Prince and just like Robin Williams, what's the next step after you die of an accidental drug overdose, and then after the conspiracy theorists get done dragging your corpse through the mud like Bernie Mac dragged through the mud by the Donald Marshall contingent saying that he was killed or died because of his involvement in human cloning. What's the next step? We all know where I'm going. You know what the next step is. Channeling. I wonder how long it's going to be before Max Spiers unfortunately has to die or come back from the other side and start testifying about what really happened, just like Marilyn Monroe, Prince, and Marilyn Manson, Michael Jackson. Oh, and Robin Williams. 1 minute and 4 seconds. Miles Johnston. Okay, again, this is the point. I made this point earlier in the video. I'm going to make it again. Folks, Miles Johnston asked on a voicemail, left a voicemail for Max Spiers' mom this morning saying what she would want said and what she'd not want said. She hasn't gotten back to me yet. If she hasn't gotten back to you yet, why is this the second interview that you've done? He already did a video himself for his own YouTube channel. Now he's making his money by going off and getting his accolades pumped up on the bigger channel Project Camelot. To see what happened here, folks, Miles Johnston, classy enough to give a call out to Max Spiers' mom to ask her what she would or would not want said about her son's obvious accidental drug overdose. And what does he do? He makes 2 videos before he even gets the answer back. Why? You couldn't wait a day? You couldn't wait 2 days? You just had to talk about it? Why? Is this burning information? The only way that this could any way in shape or form, the death of Max Spiers, be considered burning information that people have to get out and talk about right away is they're looking for fucking views. This isn't the death of the President of the United States of America. Right? This isn't the death of Kurt Cobain. This is the accidental overdose of a fringe player in this fringe world called Conspiracy Theoryville. It makes no fucking sense that he had to do these 2 things, but he did them. Why? Because Stuart Swirlow's out there making the fucking views. You best believe that Miles Johnston is going to get out there too. I'm not trying to defame the guy, but I don't know how else to see it. Maybe that's my closed-mindedness. The only thing that I can do for Miles Johnston is resolve it, try and give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he thought or believed that it was burning news and information, but he doesn't act like it. He acts like twice. He's already said. He says that he's told Christina Joan Hart and he told Kerry Cassidy at the beginning of this interview before he knew it was live on air what he really thought, based on the testimony of Monica, the poor gal who Max Spiers overdosed at her apartment, that it was just a fucking accident. Miles Johnston clearly doesn't even think that it wasn't an accident. So why is he going to get up on an interview with Kerry Cassidy? And first of all, let me tell you something. You think Miles Johnston didn't know that Kerry Cassidy was going to insist that it was fucking murder? Murder was the case? You don't think that he fucking knew that? How about this? Kerry Cassidy calls him up and he has a fucking 5-minute interview with her. No, Kerry, sorry, I apologize. All the information I have is that it was an accidental drug overdose. Maybe use it as a teachable moment to say, folks, look, I know we all want to have conjecture and points and things to say. Maybe we just give it some time. Oh, and by the way, why is Miles Johnston not even banged up in the fucking least about the death of this young man who he was intimately involved with? Dude, I have young coworkers. You can, and young employees over the course of time. If you tell me that some dude some kid that I hired or worked with, 6 months ago or whatever at the beginning of my practice, had died or passed away, I'm gonna be fucked up about it. You know, I'm not gonna talk about like it was just some shit. 1 minute and 5 seconds. Sarah Rachel Adams. She was not in contact with Miles Johnston. He asked Sarah Rachel Adams for the mother's phone number because he was asked by Monica for the information so that they could tell them on that information. And like I said, it may be a small point. It may be a point that's only interesting to me, but I thought it was interesting that he wasn't in direct contact with Sarah Rachel Adams, didn't have her direct contact information. Apparently Miles Johnston had to put out a fast blast, put out a general call out to everybody to see who had Max Spiers' mom's phone number, and Sarah Rachel Adams, I guess, took the call. 1 minute and 7 seconds. Told Sarah Rachel Adams why he was contacting her. Yeah, Miles Johnston doesn't keep in touch. And folks, and that's it. Hour and 18 minutes. It is what it is, folks. It might not be as entertaining as the last version of this video that I did, but it's certainly less inflammatory. And hopefully my agenda has been served. And my only agenda was to get this information out, to discuss these points, not to defame anybody, not to throw anyone under the bus, not to yell at anybody, call him a dimwit, an idiot, a moron, a shmoo, a schmuck, or whatever, but rather just get the information out there so that you could benefit from it. Right? So you could have a little more food for thought, a little more information to analyze. You know what? You know what happens. You become a fan of a YouTube channel, you become a fan of a media personality, you become a fan of a musician, and all of a sudden you don't really hear or see what they do in the same way. It happens with friends and family. It happens with people that we're close with, where all of a sudden people are telling us, speaking to someone about information and data, and they just can't hear it because they're tight. And I do it too. Right? You know? Believe you me, there's a lot of shit you can say about Corey Good that you can't say about Shane the Ruiner to me. Why? Because Shane the Ruiner has information has more veracity or evidentiary support? No. Because he's my boy. Right? You know? Hey. But I'm aware of that. Right? And so when I'm complaining about people like Corey Good, and then I'm hanging out or rapping with Shane online, believe you me, he knows it. He's smart enough to know that at the end of the day I have to say, oh yeah, and that's right, and another thing. You know what I mean? He's totally full of it too. But what are you going to do? Hold a grudge? Be pissed off? No. The only thing you can be aware of is your own humanity, and be aware of the fact that, hey, humanity's not a bad thing. Empathy's not a bad thing. Being able to forgive people for certain transgressions is not a bad thing. But you just got to be aware of it. You just become aware of it. Because that's being an adult. I'm an adult now. So there we go, folks. That's my 2 cents. That's my latest take on the subject. That's my analysis of that interview. Probably not as entertaining as my first one. Oh man, it was good. Maybe if I ever have to do something like, monetize this channel, or have to do something like, create a Patreon or a GoFundMe, we'll make access to my wacky back catalog, the videos that have to be taken offline. Maybe that will be part and parcel of it. Well, I don't know. Also, if you're a loyal supporter, if you're a listener, if you're a frequent commenter, baby, believe you me, reach out to me. Reach out to me on Gmail. Reach out to me on Google+. Send me a private message on YouTube, whatever. And let me know, hey, CW, I heard about this other video. I didn't get a chance to see it. Could I see it? I'll send you the link. Just promise not to post it up on Facebook if I ask you not to. Promise not to spread it around to everybody. I'll send you a fucking link. It's pretty damn funny. But guess what? If you saw this video first, you don't need to see that one. And if you saw that one, you don't need to see this one either, right? It's like the Grateful Dead, you know what I mean? The song is totally different every time. Yeah, it's still Sugar Magnolia. You know what I mean? That's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing. And we're just wrapping at the end. We're done with our main subject. We're just closing out. What's going to happen next? Well, I'm not going to say what happens next because we don't know what's going to happen next. And what am I going to cover next? Well, I'm not going to be able to talk about that because every time I say that my next video is going to be about this, that, the other thing, I end up filling you full of false hope and promise, and I never fulfill. Remember a couple of videos back before Max Spiers passed away, what was I going to say? Oh, we're going to be spending so much time concentrating on Alex Collier, right? We're going to be spending a lot of time talking about Alex Collier. We did one video about Alex Collier, but guess what? Here's something that's interesting. This is, I guess, just a little aside. We'll just talk. Maybe this is a preview. Let's talk about some shit that we might talk about in the future. Folks, if you want to tune out at this point, you can tune out. This is like the credits rolling. You know what I mean? This is like the appearance of, Nick Fury at the end of the Marvel movies after the credits roll. It's just a little bonus material. If you love CW Chanter so much, you want to hang out with me some more. This is the free association part. This is us just rapping. Guess what's so funny about Alex Collier? I started planning on going in on Alex Collier, covering the Alex Collier material because I thought it was interesting. Well, guess what happened simultaneously? Alex Collier has been making major moves on YouTube to shut down other channels who talk about his other material, who talk about his material or put up his lectures. If I'm lying, I'm dying. There's plenty of people. If you go to there was a channel called Alex Collier 2016. There was a great database that had collected all of his major interviews in one convenient place. Guess what? That thing got shut down. Why? Because of copyright complaints. Everybody's been receiving copyright complaints. If I'm lying, I'm dying. A lot of people, there was a gal, I forget her friggin' name, but she was complaining about it. There, I saw at least 2 other people on YouTube say that they had Alex Collier material up, lectures up, that they had been told by YouTube to take down because of copyright. The only person that could have possibly addressed that copyright or flexed that copyright also was either Alex Collier himself or the guy that runs his website. I forget the kid's name. Hey, if you want to do that, that's fine. Even though Alex Collier is on the record plenty of times during these interviews saying that he knows that the material's out there and he's not doing this stuff to monetize or whatever. Well, guess what? Thanks to a guy named Michael Horn, who is the official spokesman for Billy Meyer. Michael Horn is so curious. See, we're just wandering all over the place, but this is just like tidbits, gossip, and information. Michael Horn blows up everybody's spot. Michael Horn is the official mouthpiece of the famed UFO contactee Billy Meyer. And so what Michael Horn does is that he blows up everybody. He just goes off and just just does campaigns where he quote unquote spreads the truth about these. America eats its young. He just goes after other players and takes them out of the field. I'm talking, he goes after people Game of Thrones style. And so I was talking about Alex Collier, and I was going to talk about the Alex Collier materials, and I was saying things like Alex Collier is just like, besides Bashar, one of these people who I think that despite the fact that it might be all made up, that this information had validity as mythology and mysticism and cosmology and New Age spiritual philosophy. Well, guess what? So I started doing my research when I started seeing that Alex Collier was doing these moves about copyright, and so I said, well, I guess I can't cover that material unless I want my videos to be flagged down, unless I want those videos to be shut down. Why spit in the wind? You know what I mean? Why piss in the ocean? There's no point. You just move on to other things. So then I started doing my research online, and guess what? Alex Collier is not Alex Collier. Oh man, I'm not trying to defame anybody, but guess what? I've got legitimate reasons to believe, thanks to the work of Michael Horn coming after everybody, that Alex Collier is actually an ex-con by the name of Ralph Armagon, or Armagon. Ain't that some shit? We know that Alex Collier says that he was an ex-IRS agent. Well, guess what? He went to the clink, the federal prison system. There's legitimate data out there to suggest that this is the case. He went to federal prison for, guess what? Impersonating an IRS agent, right? Oh, man, are you serious? I believed. Man, oh, shit, did I believe. I didn't believe in the reptilians, but I believed that this guy was just, coming up with channeled information, just like Bashar, that had some value in philosophy. And I guess ex-cons can have, Ice Pick Slim wrote that book, so I guess, Jack Black, I guess there could be reasons why you'd listen to an ex-con. I'm saying he's the world's worst guy, but I'm just saying it was an interesting thing and made me think to myself, maybe I'm not going to put all that energy and effort into analyzing the lectures of Alex Collier, which is a shame because I had been analyzing. I've been up to analyzing interview number fucking 3, so I literally spent like 8 hours looking at the Alex Collier materials, taking notes like nobody's fucking business. Like, I'm talking like reams of fucking notes about this shit. And just to find out that, it's one thing to know that the guy's making it up. It's another thing to know that he's an ex-con who went to prison for impersonating an IRS agent to make you go, ooh, that's some wasted energy right there. Well, who knows? Maybe I'll bring that information back and data back. We all know that there's certain things that we can do to play with the data. Check out my video, Psychoreactive Blues, for Alex Collier. What was I saying? Oh, We were talking about Kerry Cassidy and the lack of discernment, David Wilcock and the lack of discernment, and the fact that these people are making money by spreading information that they're purporting to be legitimate data. But like I said, lack of discernment, lack of discernment, lack of discernment. I think we are going to do a video talking about Captain Mark Richards. Anyone who follows Project Camelot knows that Kerry Cassidy has a special place in her heart for a guy in the clink called Captain Mark Richards from fucking Space Command, whatever. Well, brothers and sisters, wait till I tell you about Captain Mark Richards. Yet more evidence that Kerry Cassidy is not good at this. Because the fact of the matter is, let me ask you a question, folks. If you knew that you were being presented by information about a person, wouldn't you want to know if that person was in prison for encouraging a cult of young men to murder another individual? How about if a person was a convicted child molester? If someone was being presented as a whistleblower, right? Wouldn't you want to know if that person was a child molester? Just so you could put the information in context. And if you were a journalist or you were listening to someone, would you expect someone with journalistic integrity to say, as they were presenting this whistleblower to you, to say, and we have to be honest, folks, they're a convicted child molester? Wouldn't you want these people who are supposedly spreading information or trying to spread or trying to build up a media empire designed to save humanity and expose the information that nobody else wants to expose, wouldn't you want them to do just a little bit of vetting, right? And a little bit of research? Well, there's a guy called Bill Broadbreaker, aka Bill Wood, who was brought to us via Project Camelot thanks to, sorry folks, Bill Ryan, Kerry Cassidy, and David Wilcox working together. Well, guess what? That's three minds who didn't have the intelligence to do a simple internet research. I don't care if this guy came out in 2007 in the early days. At that time, if you had done a little bit of research, right? David Wilcox, according to Randy Moggins, is a great researcher. No, he's not. Because if great researchers would have discovered within 2 fucking steps that this guy had a fucking criminal record. And no offense, if I'm listening to some guy who's telling me stuff that's got no evidentiary support other than the words coming out of his mouth, I'd care that mouth had been convicted of going down on a 12-year-old girl. Ain't that some shit? Stolen valor out the wazoo. We're going to have to talk about this stuff because you need me to talk about it because you're not talking about it yourself. You sit there, you tune into Project Camelot, you turn into Basis Project, and just like a good moron watching TV, I'm not trying to be insulting to you folks. This doesn't apply to everybody, but it clearly applies to some people. You know? You got to think. Why is this information being presented to me? What is the value of this information? What evidentiary support would I think that this information should be supported by or have? What further research can I do? What would I expect the journalist or the person presenting the speaker to have done beforehand to legitimize or delegitimize this information? Right? And let me tell you something, folks. Just like eating your vegetables, right? Just like watching Masterpiece Theater instead of watching, I don't know, Black Orphan or whatever, some piece of Star Trek or whatever, right? The good, nutritious stuff, right? You can spend your time reading Gore Vidal, or you can spend your time reading, I don't know, Stephen King, whatever, something, you know what I mean? The good stuff always goes down a little bit harder, and it's hard work, and it's tough. So if the stuff just goes in like molasses, if it just goes in like a Burger King Happy Meal, right? Like boo, 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 you know? If it's all lasers and sphere beams and spaceships and Draco, reptilian, Anunnaki, Zechariah Sitchin learning how to read Sumerian in the bathroom. You know what I mean? If it's too good to be true, it's not true. And if it just goes down, if you're just sitting there getting spoon-fed stuff, you got to turn your brain back on. And don't for a minute think, which is what some people do, that just because you're not watching the Fergie ass shaking video and you're watching Sarah Rachel Adams, or you're not watching the ball game, but you're watching Alex Jones, that you might not be involved in the exact same dumbass activity. Turning off your brain and just let data come in. Data come in. Data come in. It's programming. I don't care if the information comes to you in a 5-minute YouTube video rather than a 50-minute show. It's programming. Okay? Everybody's got an agenda. Everybody's got a horse in the race. And everybody's got, look, that's life. I'm not saying these people are bad people. I'm just saying that you have to be aware of everything that's going on and don't turn off your brain. And don't for a second think that just because you sit there saying, my brain is not turned off, I'm open-minded to all possibilities, and I'm a researcher, that means anything. That's just shit you might be saying to yourself. It's got to be hard. And you've got to be willing to let your concepts and presuppositions and assumptions be challenged. If you're a Donald Marshall fan and you can't hear me talk about the Donald Marshall material, you're not in the game. You're not using your own brain. Okay? You're just like the guy following the sports team. If you can't hear me talking about Kerry Cassidy, or talking about Miles Johnston, or talking about David Wilcock, or talking about Drake Bailey, or talking about Benjamin Fulford, if you can't hear that information, first of all, these people aren't your best friends. You're not in love with them. Okay? You shouldn't be. They ain't doing shit for you. Okay? Turn on your mind. You have to be saying to yourself, if I'm interested in the work of Drake Bailey, then of course I would want to hear contrary information, of course, because I'm not here to be a follower. I'm here to have an open mind, think for myself, and try and come up with my own fucking truth. And we'll leave it at there, folks. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you made it to the end, you spent as much time listening to me just sit here and talk as you could have spent watching a movie. And I don't think I'm that entertaining. So thank you. Thank you for spending the time with me. Thank you for letting me in your life. It means so much to me. Sure, I'm human too. And I've got an agenda too. And I like views too, right? But I really like it when people speak to me and speak back to me. So get involved in the comment section, man. I'm telling you, if you're not paying attention to the comment section of my videos, if you're not paying attention to the comment section of a lot of these videos, sure, there's a lot of thumbs up, thumbs down, and one-line sentences, but there's also a lot of people putting in data, putting in analysis. Avail yourself of that information. It's fucking free. The cost of your internet service provider connection, you have access to YouTube, you have the access to so much data. Use that shit. Not to play sides, not to pick favorites, but to use it for your benefit. But let's not get repetitive. Let me just say I love you, I love you, I love you. Thank you. I'm so glad we had this time together. It's the Mandela effect. I remember Mr. Rogers used to be a clean-cut dude with short hair and a sweater. But you listen to the clip. He just sang the song. Now he's got long hair and a beard. Come on, folks. Everybody knows I'm the clone of Jerry Garcia. Right? I'm Grizzly Adams back in YouTube form. I love y'all. Thank you for spending this time together with me. We're going to be talking about some other stuff coming up. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I think I'm doing Psychic Vampires again tomorrow, which should be a blast. Give a shout out to Tom the Arrows. I love that guy. That guy's hysterical. He's fun. Oh my God. Check out his channel. It's brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. A little bit high strung, a little bit aggressive. But oh my God. And he's as obsessed with Patrick John Coleman as I am with J. Essex. And it's my understanding that we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about J. Essex. And let me repeat yet again, for no reason and nobody's benefit but my own, my conjecture, and I swear to God, I could defend this title. I can defend this title. I am the preeminent expert on J. Essex on YouTube. I am. You better believe I am. Who else has videos talking about him that's not just short clips? Jordan Womble thought he was a Jesuit priest. I love Jordan Womble, but God bless him, he was wrong on that front. But I'll tell you what I'm not wrong about, the fact of I've seen all of J. Essex's videos. Ooh, baby. I'm an expert, and I've got a good memory. So Psychic Vampire should be fun. If it all plays out and comes to fruition and to pass, I'll let you guys know. I'll make a little short announcement video maybe in the morning. I love y'all. Sorry to fuck with you guys. I have to take videos up, take videos down. That's the way it goes in the city of Compton. I love you. God bless Max Spiers. Max Spiers, rest in peace. May you be at rest. May you be at peace. May you be free. May you be happy, if those are possibilities beyond the veil. I love y'all. Take care. And to all the friends and family of Max Spiers, my condolences, and sincerely, God bless y'all. Love y'all. Bye-bye.